Welcome back to the Unanimous Decision Podcast. I am your host, DPalm. Follow me on Twitter at DPalm66. Follow the show on Twitter at UDPod. Follow the entire MTR network at the MTR Network. You found us at Lose to Subscribe in the iTunes Store. Subscribe everywhere podcasts are given away for absolutely free. Subscribe on Spotify. It's a new way to get all your MTR goodness delivered directly through your favorite listening devices. Leave that 5-star review on iTunes. I'll read it on the air. I guess mean, nice. I'll read it. I have no shame. It's gotten there. Just leave the reviews. We'll read them. It helps the show, helps the network, and it takes nothing for you to do so. We're back. It's a whole another week in the books. We're recording on Sunday, as we usually do, about noon, which means Takeover's in the rear view, which means I get to have on one of my favorite people in the world from the PWTorch Deep Dive podcast. We've got Rich Fann. What up, Rich?
Not much fun. Looking forward to chatting. I get to talk not just about wrestling today, so this is fun.
It's so funny because I had the preview show up last episode talking about Survivor Series, and then I was like, well, now I'm going to have a wrestling person on talking about not wrestling. But I feel like it'd be a betrayal of your talents and my interests not to talk a little graphs before we get into it. So before we get into anything else, what was your knee-jerk reaction to TakeOver last night? NXT Takeover happened last night. It was called War Games 2. There were 5 matches on the card, 4 matches officially. Just a quick review. Matt Riddle flash KO'd Cassius Ohno. Kairi Sane lost to Shayna Baszler in a 2-3 falls match for the women's NXT title. Aleister Black used 2 black masses to kick the head off of Johnny Gargano. Tommaso Ciampa retained his belt against the Velveteen Hollywood Dream. And the team of Ricochet, Pete Dunne, and the War Raiders took on the Undisputed Era in War Games and came out victorious. Just knee-jerk reaction. We're less than 24 hours from the event. You and I both love wrestling. You and I both love NXT. What was your kind of overall feel for the show last night?
Oh, I thought it was great. I saw 4 matches. I felt a little disappointed by 4, just because I figured with the roster they have NXT guys, they could have done more. But even with the Flash Knockout edition, it felt right. Especially because the matches out of the 4 that needed the time got the time, and the ones that didn't. I mean, I really thought we were talking before we started recording, I think that some of the agents, they have some of the smartest minds in professional wrestling between Shawn Michaels, Terry Taylor, Triple H, Albert. You have so many, that's not even talking about the Euros.
Right.
So many good agents and so many people whose sole purpose, either from their career or from what they've learned in it, is to make these new stars shine. And I think they did it magnificently throughout the entire show.
So you spoke about the kind of the truncated card, and that's kind of a tradition now at takeovers, is that a lot of the roster is not going to make it. And while I agree that, sometimes you're like, I wish I could see more of the talent, I think it makes the talent that makes the shows more special. I think that saying things like Johnny Gargano having the record number of appearances on TakeOver makes that matter. And it, like you said, it gives the matches room to breathe. And I was a bit like you when I saw the mat lineup. I think this is the fewest matches on a TakeOver ever. So I had that initial reaction of, wow, you're going to run 3 singles and then 1 schmoz match. Not a lot of talent sitting at home and watching, but I think NXT is in a place where we've got such a strong top of the card and so many new additions that it's important that those new guys look and see what takeovers are supposed to be and kind of let these be the standard bearers. I like the way they approach takeovers as kind of less everyone gets a shot to shine, more of a, hey, you got to earn these spots. You got to really demand these spots. And we've seen the transition a couple years ago where it was tag teams were featured heavily, and then we've seen the features through in the past women's being featured heavily, and now we're focusing back on the top of the card. And I got to tell you, the match quality last night was pretty damn strong from my point of view.
Yeah, and even for the people like a Velveteen Dream who've only been in the business 3-4 years, you put him in the ring with someone like Tommaso Ciampa, and you also give him excellent teaching and people that believe in him, and you see how magnificent. That's the only word I could think of for that match in particular. Like, I was shocked that someone that young is that good.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a chance to listen to Shawn Michaels was on Edge and Christian's podcast? I'm not in the business of putting over other people's shows, but it was a really good interview because he talked about how, and it's funny because one of the part of the interview is like, I know our business is what it is, but Edge, you always knew I kind of like that artsy fartsy stuff part of the business, the storytelling, and watching that stuff occur last night, be it with the run-ins during the women's match, or Johnny Gargano with the fake out acceptance of the black mask, or even kind of the character building things that we saw from Dream during his match with Ciampa, I think that the storytelling, the quote unquote artsy fartsy stuff, is kind of the strongest we've seen in a long time in NXT. I think the argument could get made that the highlight of NXT was kind of that Neville through Kevin Owens through Finn Balor run. But if you're going to say there's a period that's challenging, I think we're in it right now.
Yeah, I mean, oh gosh, I'm gonna have to listen to that today at some point because I think that'd be a really good listen. It's wild how diversified they are with the talent and how they're keeping track, because I know like everyone always brings up the idea, say, of New Japan, who they'll have a class of 4 or 5 wrestlers, and over the course of a couple of months they'll get really good really quick, but they're not doing 100 folks at once at varying stages. And as they both work, it's just with the WWE and the sheer size of the company, they can afford to do what they're doing at NXT and do it well. I mean, say what you will. I mean, I know a lot of stuff came out this week with Nia Jax. It's not NXT's fault. She was a little less than careful with people in the ring. That's a personal issue. Now, you know, you also have to deal with the truth of if I was in WWE and I screwed up like that, and I'm not related to a certain billion-dollar entity in entertainment, I would probably get sent packing. But again, also, I'm not her size, I'm not her beauty, I'm not her skill in the ring, and I don't have those bloodlines. Sometimes life goes that way. So I think they do a good job of not just having legacy people, they also have the people who could, I mean, gosh, I never thought in a million years Patrick from freaking Tough Enough would be this. That's what's in my head the entire. And he's shading Hulk Hogan. Everyone keeps saying he's imitating. He is shading Hulk Hogan at every single chance he gets.
He's gonna show up in a nice Tri-Terry t-shirt, and then we're going to all have to tell Cam like that. It's a great thing, and I'm already sick about it.
Oh my God! Because you know he's gonna retweet like a picture of it, and he's like, "You can get those right here at Teespring."
Of course. Oh, of course. And I'm not mad at him for it. Look, hey, man, sell it. Sell it as long as they're buying it. You got to sell it. That's all I feel about it. Well, let's talk also about kind of the State of the Union, because we're headed into Survivor Series right now. It's going to happen tonight. I know both of us will be watching and probably tweeting too much about it. We're not having Becky Lynch on the card. We've got this kind of flash Daniel Bryan heel turn. How do you feel going into Survivor Series? I know you and I are big fans, and you obviously have the deep dive that we're going to talk about in a second. But what do you think about the State of the Union and the WWE headed into Survivor Series, which really leads into kind of WrestleMania season?
Well, that's a good question, Paul. I think really going into this kickoff of WrestleMania season by way of Survivor Series, there's a lot of stuff thrown together, but a lot of it is kind of similar to Becky Lynch's entry, fortuitous. Like I argued on Twitter earlier this week that this is probably the most pivotal move in one of the modern eras. One, the first domino being Roman being sick, and then the second domino being they were so open to everything after his illness was made public that Becky Lynch is now a linchpin of all of their storyline. You have her get injured, and now Vince wants to shake things up a little bit. So while he already had a plan to give Bryan the title, he finally gave in and let him become a heel. And then on the other side of things, you've given AJ Styles an opportunity to be the chasing, quote-unquote, legitimate champ. And then on the Raw side of things, you have Brock Lesnar, who's returned to be his have gun, will travel, super mercenary legend in my mind, because he's going to get that bag no matter who it is, where it is, what sport it is. And everyone on Raw chasing him. It's great. And so for Survivor Series, some of the matches, like the 10-man tag, they're going to be okay. That's fine. But those champion versus champion matches are good previews of where you're going to see some of those people lining up come WrestleMania, and particularly the two biggest titles, the men's and women's singles championships.
100%. Well, let's talk about the show you do run over at PWTorch, the deep dive. I've been on there more than once. How's everything been going as you head into the end of 2018?
Pretty good. Yeah, I'm the Torch there, PWTorchLivecast.com, every Saturday at 6 Eastern, unless there's something weird. I do the deep dive, which is an hour dive into a subject or subjects that are kind of interested in the world of wrestling. They don't necessarily always have to be in chronological order, so it isn't necessarily the events of the day. It might be something and how it affects things. So, for instance, this week we did a preview of Survivor Series, NXT Takeover, War Games 2, and a review of the Marine 6, where we got to gush about Becky Lynch and how Shawn Michaels and other things that occurred that I don't want to spoil for your listeners. Just watch the movie. It is very good. And then next week, I'm going to have Chris Harrington at Mookie Ghana, who is basically the dude who does deep dives into the economics of wrestling. We're going to talk about how, as much as people talk about the monolith that is the WWE, you should also pay attention to the streaming services that have kind of come up after FlowSlam failed and how they're making money giving independent promotions an opportunity to do what WWE does with their huge network.
Well, I think it's a very exciting time in the WWE, but also in the larger business. It's kind of wrestling going through another boom period that we kind of saw when I was growing up and as a WCW kid. It's interesting because there is no one person to point at and say that's a WCW. It's kind of, you look at the WWE side and then everything else comes up kind of as the assorted competition, but the assorted competition is thriving and doing well. Hell, we saw David Arquette get welcomed back into the wrestling community with a damn death match this weekend.
Yeah, and watching that match and him surviving Nick Gage, the first question I asked myself was, how soon can they get this man on the WrestleMania?
Yeah, right?
Because he's in great shape. He wrestled, like I saw him during All In. He wrestles well. Like he has taken this seriously. In fact, it was to the point where several of his Hollywood friends were tweeting him and basically congratulating him on figuring out where his passion was after all these years. And that's so wild to me.
It's so wild. I'm not a deathmatch guy. I do appreciate it once in a while watching a good old CZW DVD. But when I saw he was involved with Nick Gage before the match even happened, I was like, well, this is going to go really poorly or really well. And good for him. It ended up going really well. The rumor is now that they're trying to book him for the Rumble. And if they're going to do it, I'm on board. At first, I was like, this is one of the guys who was one of the harbingers of the end of something that I used to love in WCW. But him being put in that position by the company and by Vince Russo isn't his fault. And he's showing right now, like, why he even said yes in the first place, because at some very real level, he cares about this.
Yeah, there are some people where you look at them and it's in any walk of life. It could be football. It could be, anyone who says, I have a number of students when I was in a career service side of business who said I wanted to be an agent, and then they didn't want to do the work to be an agent. They just wanted to be Drew Rosenhaus. So when you look and say, I want to be a pro wrestler, and you can get yourself in decent shape because you have millions of bucks and you have a personal trainer, and you figure you can do one or two moves. And as much as I loved him growing up, I kind of equate it to now the Shane McMahon plan, where you can do all this wild stuff and take the time off. In the case of David Arquette, homeboy is out there almost every weekend, and he's wrestling in front of 100 people, 10 people, or 1,000 folks. He doesn't care. He just wants to get better, and I will tip my cap forever to him for that, because especially at his age, like I'm 37, I could not imagine in my 40s. Only DDP has been someone that's been able to pull that off, and now David Arquette being the second person who was taken under his wing by DDP makes total sense.
It's wild. He took that. He took a diamond cutter on some light tubes, and I was just like, "What are we doing? What in the world are we doing?" Because you're right. This is the part of wrestling that it's hard to explain to people, is that some of these guys, like especially David Arquette, he doesn't need this money. He doesn't need to go through light tubes. He does it because he loves it. And he does it like we talked about in the Shawn Michaels interview, kind of because it scratches a creative itch. It allows them to be storytellers in a different medium. But you and I don't just love professional graphs. We do love it. But we also love more. You're a football coach too, aren't you?
Yes, sir.
How did the season go for you guys?
It's a team that's struggling, so we're trying to build it up. Went 3-6, which is, over the last 2 years, we've won more games, sadly, than they had won in the previous 4. So, because they had gone winless a couple of years, 1 win a couple of years, so going to 2 and now 3 wins, kind of building it up. So I'm excited about that. I might be, to be perfectly honest, because the place is in the middle of Trump country, and there's only so many times I can take parents making veiled complaints of the intelligence of the offensive coordinator, that being me, before I have to enlighten them to my resume and ask them, hey, here's my phone. You want to call Dave Wanstead? You want to call anyone at Pitt? Ask my work ethic. You want to call the other places I've been over the last 12 years? by all means, but if it's just because your son isn't in right now, I can't help you with that. So that sort of thing become frustrating. And I'm also reaching, as we were saying before, we've done it. I got a 6-year-old that is now into hockey and ice hockey and football and soccer, and it might be time for me to make that move where I move from, coaching to just professional dad.
You never felt the urge to coach a little one?
I don't think I have it in me to do it, because I think he needs to do it on his own. Like, I'm happy. Like, I watched the hockey game yesterday with him for the first time, and I could tell he was tired from he had done ice hockey in the morning, and so he was doing deck hockey in the afternoon. And I think, and especially seeing it from as a football coach, my job in the car with him was to be dad, not to tell him, especially at age 6, hey, if you had more wins, you could have been able to play defense better. Now, if he's older, maybe that's a conversation or two, but the second we get to the house, I'm dad again. And I think that, if anything, the lesson I've learned from coaching for almost 13 years is that I feel like it was a job well done, and that kind of prepared me for being a dad that isn't like, I'm in the crowd, and instead of yelling, I'm just saying, listen to your coach, because the guy's telling them what to do, and I don't know anything about hockey, so I'm not going to pretend like I do.
It was wild because I don't know, I've had my dad on a couple times, but when I played football in high school, he was obviously very, very hands-on, very vocal, but he never coached me growing up. And my dad played in the NFL, had a cup of coffee in the NFL. He's no slouch. He knows football. And it was always nice to have him as a resource, but I think it was nicer, you're right, to have him as dad. It's so funny because when I wrestled in high school, my dad knew nothing about wrestling, the same way you are with hockey. So he's like, I'm just going to be just as supportive as all hell, because that's all I can do is just be supportive, because I have no advice.
Yeah, because the first urge would be, especially in this not generation, but this technological advancement age we're in, I could Google, hey, what does a defenseman do in hockey? What does a wing do in hockey? That's not going to help him. Like, first of all, he's 6. Like, and the coaches they're tough, but they're fair. They're telling the kids afterwards, hey, if you're playing defense, you can't go for the puck, because your job is to make sure that the guys who are going for it and attacking have coverage. And in my head, I'm like, this is like a safety with a linebacker blitz.
Exactly.
You can't blitz too, unless you're Rex Ryan and you just like touchdowns being
blitz
scored.
everyone all the time. Well, that's great, man. I'm glad to hear everything's going well on that front. I'm sorry to hear about that's actually the one complaint I hear most from my friends who are coaches is this job be great if it wasn't for the parents.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's one of those things where a lot of the folks who want to volunteer, like they want to volunteer their kid because their kid's playing, and it's like, we appreciate that. And for me, I don't need the money. I don't need the stress. Like, I can just stay, do my work, help out with my son, and I'm fine. I love coaching because I love teaching kids, and I love the light bulb coming on in a kid's head, not the kid who's because when I played hockey, well, not football. When I played football when I was in high school, I wasn't good enough for college, but I knew leverage and I knew how to maximize my talent. And that's all I want to do with everyone else's kid. You don't have to be the all-state linebacker, but if I can teach you to drop in a zone and you can recognize hook, curl, flat, that is all, and that's all you can do. That's all you need to do.
Right. And more importantly, that's most of the kids you're going to encounter. Most kids aren't going to play college ball. Most kids aren't going to be playing on Sundays. And I think it's important that coaches like you are out there to do this, because there are so many coaches who see children as vessels for them to get rich or famous, that it's nice to be reminded that you guys still exist and you're still doing the good work out there. And I tip my cap to the coaches, because I've been a teenager and I've been a teenage athlete, and they are not the easiest to deal with.
Oh, yeah, especially when you have especially as a majority white community. So my first conversation last year was, hey, I know you like rap music, but let's not use that word ever.
Oh, man.
Even pretending.
Yeah, I can't coach. That was it. That story right there, can't coach. I can't do it. Don't have the patience. Let's talk about some more sports outside the square circle. Let's start in the NBA, because we're hitting November. Things still aren't getting as hot as they guess could be, but a lot of stories out there. But my favorite story so far is the Miami Heat court. So if you didn't notice, this season every team's kind of doing this city team jerseys, they're revamping their look for certain home games. And the Miami Heat went full Vice City and brought like the Miami Vice logo at midcourt. They have the black and teal jerseys. And the one question I have to raise is, why isn't this every day for the Heat? Because, like, I don't know about you, I'm not married to anything that the Heat have ever done aesthetically, but these jerseys are fire.
Yeah, as a Knicks fan, Pat Riley and I don't ever get along anymore because I'm bitter. So, yeah, it does. It does. I mean, that's up there. You know, my buddy who's a Jets fan has the Bill Belichick letter where he was like, I don't want to coach you guys. just let me go. With Pat Riley, it's basically the same thing with the Facts of Doom. And so, yeah, I have no love for the Heat. But I do love, I thought Los Heat was going to be good because that was like a step away from Eddie Guerrero era Latino Heat.
Right.
But going full Miami Vice, my God, yes, I'm for it. I'm proud they leaned into it. And if there's any 80s television show that deserves its play other than, say, Airwolf, I would say it's Miami Vice.
You and Airwolf. People, either you love Airwolf or you've never heard of Airwolf, and I'm in the latter camp, but you're like the fourth person I've had in the last 6 months mention Airwolf to me, so I think I've got to find this show.
It's like Knight Rider with a helicopter. You would be surprised the number of situations that can be ended by an attacked helicopter.
Violence doesn't solve everything, asterisk, unless the violence is delivered by an attack helicopter. That's amazing. I think that of all the city things that have happened, I don't know if you saw the Nets had to pull up. They lined the court with like Coogee sweater design, but because it was so slick, they had to pull it up before the game started because they were worried about people falling on it. So if there's one that's worked and fits the city, it's Miami Heat so far. The biggest news in the NBA is kind of a little sad because Carmelo Anthony signed with the Rockets in the offseason. Everyone thought, he'll bring scoring, not without realizing that, they sacrificed a lot of defense to get the room to sign him. And now it looks like they're going to part ways after 10 games. You and I are at a certain age where this is kind of the age where players tend to slow down, like especially when we grew up. Now it looks players are playing. I think it's weirder because you look at Carmelo Anthony's contemporaries, like LeBron James, even Dwayne Wade, their slowdown hasn't been as pronounced. LeBron James, it hasn't started yet, which is getting terrifying. We're going to talk about that later. But with Dwayne Wade, it's kind of his exit's been a bit more graceful. Carmelo just feels like he had that one skill that I'm going to score more points than you in these really kind of awkward long jumpers and by bullying my way inside. And he doesn't feel like he can do either one of those now. Do you think that Tracy McGrady's right? Because Tracy McGrady had hit a lot of his career stolen by injury. Carmelo seems to have been stolen by time. And as a former Knicks fan, it's a little too close to home for you. Is it time for Carmelo to hang it up?
I think it is, because if that's your one thing, and you also have to, as much as he said he was happy with it on the Rockets, you could tell he was not one for the bench. It's that double whammy. It's with all the other examples. At least at some point, those guys were still starters. I mean, Dwayne had to suck up the pride a little bit and come off the bench a bit on the Cavaliers, but then that had its time, and he was kind of like, thanks but no thanks. I think with Carmelo, I lovingly referred to him to my fellow Knicks friends as 30 for 30, and he once you lose that ability and you have that ISO ball and you're not dropping the points you should be, you become a bit of an albatross. And to be honest, you become a joke. And I don't think regardless of my misgivings about Carmelo over the years, I would hate to see someone of his caliber demean himself and embarrass himself by trying to keep up. Because if you're not going to play defense and you're getting a step slower and you're only trying to do offense and you're a step behind with your shot, you're only going to be on someone's poster, and you're only going to get the ESPN. They'll forget about the fact that maybe you had a couple good passes, but show the 15 times you got, dunked on, or the shots that were air balls and stuff like that. He doesn't. At this point, I don't know if coaching is something he'd like to do, but I think someone with his mindset would be great to get in the head of some of the younger kids coming up and showing them, yeah, you need to have a little dog in you, but you also need to learn from my example if he has that much introspection.
See, and that's what's weird to me is that we're talking about introspection. We're talking about like walking away from this before he gets embarrassed. Generally, as a society, we let athletes retire on their own terms. Peyton Manning cannot turn his neck, and we let him keep playing football. Like, I think it's weird. I agree with you largely. I agree. I think that the days of Carmelo being what Carmelo was are over, but I'm also a little hesitant to say, oh, it's time for you to hang him up forever, because is it because it's happening right now that we can't see the full scope? I think that Carmelo's always been kind of unfairly regarded in that. Like, people are like, Carmelo should retire. And, like, is he a borderline Hall of Famer? First of all, it's not borderline. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. That's a ridiculous question. But secondly, when you talk about Allen Iverson, you don't talk about Memphis, and you don't talk about that sad end when he returned to Philly. We talk about the good Philly years, and we talk about those 2 years in Denver when he and Carmelo were terrifyingly, like, at the bottom line, they were going to score more points than you. Like, that was kind of the deal in Denver with George Karl at the helm. Is it going to be something where I'm talking in 6 months where maybe Carmelo does walk away and we think about him more fondly, kind of in those Nuggets years in that 150 win next season? Or are we evolving as a culture to a place where your last impression is your only impression? Because especially when you've got a career where, let's be honest, Carmelo never made a conference finals. His biggest accolades are Olympics, college, and being a scoring machine. And because of the way it ended, is that going to color his entire NBA career for people? I really hope not, but what do you think?
I think you're right. I think, gosh, it's so tough because in today's NBA, there's so many different dynamics that they're playing with that you really didn't have 10, 20 years ago. The thing for me is, how long is a career going to be? Like, if you're going to be just a star, you're cool with like 5 to 7 years. No one's going to be LeBron. LeBron is the Highlander. He will play until Bronny can play.
And I just don't get it. Like, I'm at a point where I just don't understand it anymore.
Yeah. Like, I know much was made of his, you don't want to be around me when I run out of patience line, but you don't want to be around this man when he's playing with his son and you decide to give a Draymond Green foul to Bronny in a game. Because I think that's not going to end well for you.
You're right. I just think I hope that we have a proper perspective on Carmelo. I do think it's over. I think if he wants to go somewhere and collect some minutes on a team that's not contending, he can do that. But I don't think that he's really built for that. I think that he likes to be in front of the pack, and I think it's why Houston felt like a good fit in a vacuum. But turns out, it didn't work. 1 and 2, they haven't been great this season. Houston lost a lot defensively to bring in Carmelo, or I guess as a product of it. They lost a lot defensively, and then they brought in Carmelo. I don't think it was a cause and effect thing. And I think that's going to be a bigger issue for them going forward than anything else, because they're behind a step, and it's not because of Carmelo Anthony. Let's go now to LA. We'll stay in the Western Conference, because you're right. LeBron James is the Highlander. LeBron James is the outlier point. LeBron James is 6 months older than me. And people say, oh, LeBron, maybe he's lost a step. I don't think he can do this with the Lakers, blah, blah, blah. He won't make the playoffs. Look, I know kind of national media has been a little iffy on the Lakers' opening record, and LeBron has looked – people say, oh, maybe a little slow, maybe not fit for this team. Let me remind you, LeBron, if you go through the stat line, LeBron's been throwing up 27, 10, and 11s, 32, 8, and 14s all season. What happened on, I think it was Wednesday? Yeah, Wednesday night when they played the Blazers was one of those things where you're like, oh, LeBron James is terrifying. Because LeBron James scored 44 points, had 10 rebounds and 9 assists on, I believe it was 19 shots. At one point in the second quarter, or 6.5 minutes, LeBron scored 11 points, had 3 assists, and scored 4 rebounds, and blocked Damian Lillard at the rim during the game. He hit 3 threes, 2 of which were from 28 feet at the end of the second quarter. This is all in the second quarter. Like, this is absurd. And he's going to be 34 in a month. This is not what we're used to seeing, Rich.
No, he's not normal. Like, I know with wrestling, they make the PCO, he's not human. That's LeBron James. You look at this guy, and you really could see, unlike, say, Carmelo, as he gets into the twilight of his career, and, a lot of my friends, in fact, my host of the East Coast cast, Travis Bryan, is a big Sixers fan. If he were to have decided to go to the Sixers, he could have taken upon himself to say, hey, I'm going to go off the bench and save my career about another 7 years. But no, he's going balls to the wall, minute in, minute out. Some games he might be smart enough to take himself out. My big issue is going to be with the Lakers. And I don't know if you've talked about this on prior episodes of UD Pod, but Is Luke ready for this work?
I don't know. I'm not. So you stumbled across one of my mini pet peeves. I don't like the entire Walton family. I've been forced by people better than me to revise my stance to say adult males. But I'm not a Walton family fan. I think the fact that Walton's the head coach is ridiculous. And when he gets fired, I will shed no tears. But I think it's interesting because people are like, oh, LeBron's going to be a coach killer. Magic Johnson's running that team. And people take a lot of agency away from Magic Johnson to give LeBron James like this absolute level of control with the Lakers. Like, you don't seem to realize who Magic Johnson really is. Magic Johnson got coaches running out of town when he was in LA. Like, legitimately. Not like, oh, we think LeBron. No. He openly, publicly, and outwardly admitted to getting coaches fired. So if Luke isn't long for this world, I wouldn't look necessarily at LeBron for the reason. I think that what you're going to see in LA is the realization of just how much better LeBron can make your players. Because, like, Lonzo Ball's hitting threes. Like, Brandon Ingram looks good in space. He still looks like super stretched out Wiz Khalifa, but he can shoot. So it works. And I think it's going to be interesting, especially as we get down the stretch and things get tighter, and if they start signing if they sign, let's say, a Carmelo Anthony or another top flight kind of guy kind of floating around who has one or two particular skills, how will Luke Walton manage those egos? Because that's a lot of what NBA head coaching is managing egos of talented players. And congratulations, the more talented players you have, the harder that job gets, which is why I think like Eric Spoelstra and Tyronn Lue need to get more credit for the good they did with LeBron on the team. But I think your question, I'm not avoiding it. I just think that I don't have the answer because I think after the Blazers game, they were 8-6, which is, not great, but at the same time is the best start for the Lakers since 2011, 2012. So part of it is going to be a management of expectation and realization of reality, but it's also going to be kind of how much patience do you expect the Laker faithful to have as LeBron James is currently on pace to pass Michael Jordan on the all-time scoring list by mid-January. People say, oh, that's kind of nice. It's more than kind of nice. LeBron James is not a scorer first. This should terrify people. LeBron James passing Michael Jordan on the scoring list is another feather in this, if you really want to have a GOAT debate cap, because LeBron scores almost as a secondary thought. And it's like you said earlier, his second act or final act of his career will not be fading down the stretch, missing open jumpers. It will be transitioning to playing the one at 6'8" and passing around everyone.
Yeah.
Like the end of his career will be Magic Johnson, which is mind-boggling.
Yeah, how many people can look at themselves as like quote unquote failing up to Magic Johnson?
Looks like you did a whole workout. What's your wind down? Oh, Magic Johnson. Okay, that's your cool down, Magic Johnson. All right, fair enough. Jimmy Butler got his way, as we covered already. He is now in Philadelphia. They lost the first game, won the second, and he's bumped Markelle Fultz from the starting lineup. Now, you and I have both seen the clip of Markelle Fultz shooting free throws. If you haven't seen it, please just stop the podcast, go to your YouTube app, and hit play, because he's pump faking air, Rich. I'm not a basketball expert. I will always refer to boys' basketball season as what men and women do during wrestling season. But it's not good. And I think we're at a point where, him getting taken out of the starting lineup for Jimmy Butler, it can be bad for Markelle Fultz. Like he fired his shooting coach this week, or his shooting coach left, which is interesting because if he fires him, that means the work wasn't working. But if he left, that meant the shooting coach didn't want his name involved with Markelle Fultz. So it's a huge gap in the wording there. But do you think Jimmy Butler is the kind of guy who can say, this is going to be an easy PR win for me to kind of take Markelle Fultz under his wing? Because I, for one, the way I'm wired, I loved what Jimmy Butler did in Minnesota. He's like, these guys aren't playing hard. I want guys who play hard. Get me out of here. And he's landing on a team where you can say what you want about Embiid and Simmons, about their deficiencies as players, Simmons being, I don't take jumpers, and Embiid saying, I just can't seem to stop Al Horford to save my damn life. Despite those deficiencies, they play hard as hell. And Jimmy Butler, 2 games in, seems like a guy who's happy to be there. Is the final nail in this PR blitz going to be the reclamation of Markel Fultz, or is that even possible? Because I've heard people suggest that it's physical, or that maybe it's just like a large-scale case of the yips. You're around high school athletes often. You've been around athletes your entire life. The yips at this level, at this stage, seems weird. Like it's. I know people who follow baseball are like, oh, some certain second baseman can't throw to first. Which to my answer is, then why do you have a job?
I will be with you on that. Yeah.
Are we at the why do you have a job phase for Markel Fultz? Like, I watched some old college highlights of him. This is not the same player.
It's the mental part, and it's not necessarily I don't know if I can do it at this level. I think I don't know if I can do it night in, night out. Like I think the biggest lie LeBron ever told the world of athletics was that you can do this consistently. I mean, that young man, well, not a young man now, he came into the NBA as a man child and just has continued to evolve. There isn't one area. I mean, I think about who was it that just said that in the news this week? I want to say it was Booger McFarland or another ex-NFL lineman mentioned, how many people say Shaq was, he didn't get his best version of himself. And he's like, well, speaking as a big man, my dude who's always on Twitter, George.
George Foster?
Yeah. He's like, just being a big man, existing is painful. And so you could say, this guy could have done X, this guy could have done Y, but he was so, especially in Shaq's case, he was so big. Unless you live that life, you can't tell him what to do. In the case of Fultz, he sees all these guys who are just his luminaries, and they're just killing it night in, night out. And I don't know if it's built in him, and I really feel bad. This is like his second year in the NBA for him to be prepared to do this, the level to which the 76ers want. Because that's the other thing we don't talk about. In my former life as a Bills fan, there is a lot of expectations for a downtrodden team with a high draft pick. This isn't like where you look at, say, the Lakers, and for all that's going on right now with the Big Baller brand, you're not hearing the jokes you heard last year or even a year before.
Oh, correct. 1,000%. You're 100% right. And we'll talk about your former fanhood team in a second. But I want to talk about the favorite team of everyone who casually watches the NBA, the Golden State Warriors. To catch everyone up, on Monday night, Draymond Green botched the final possession against the Clippers. He should have passed him the ball. Should have passed the ball to Kevin Durant, who was open. There were yelling happening on the court, and Draymond Green eventually got suspended one game for contact detrimental.
Yeah.
The reason he got suspended, which honestly I think is interesting, because this is the first time, this was noted by, I think it was Katie Nolan on her wonderful podcast. This is the first time that contact detrimental was actually contact detrimental. It wasn't like, oh, you hit your wife, or, oh, you were driving drunk. It was actually, you started a fight that resulted in you yelling at Kevin Durant, who the fuck are you talking to? And as more information comes out about the fight, apparently he called Durant a bitch repeatedly. He said, go ahead and leave. We don't need you. We won't without you. Rich, I know they've publicly made amends and from the court dapping each other up, but after they lost to Houston by, I think it was 20, Kevin Durant said, don't ask me about that again, in a very snappy way. This is super complicated because Draymond Green, he's right, technically. He was there before Kevin Durant, and they did win before Kevin Durant. He's also the one who brought in Kevin Durant as kind of the intermediary between the team and him during that last season in Oklahoma City. Now, the big scale, like the albatross in the room, is the fact that Kevin Durant has the opportunity to leave the team after the season. They've done everything they could to try to say, we want you back, in the form of Jalen Lacob and the ownership group making those overtures. They even had Kevin Durant do a PR walk through the new Warriors arena that's being built, wearing a hard hat looking like Bob the fucking Builder. Now, Draymond Green isn't like a scrub, though. You got to remember, Draymond Green won Defensive Player of the Year. He's been the emotional core of this team. And while Steph is the public face, there's a very real argument to be made that Draymond is the private face. When the team says these two players are fighting, we're going to punish the one who we don't care if they leave, and they punish Draymond. People are saying, oh, people argue all the time, or oh, teams get in fights, and that's all true. We've all been on teams. I played football, and guess what? When a room full of 100 guys, you do not like everyone on the team. That's just math. And basketball, 12 guys. Hey, guess what? Put 12 people you don't know in a room who just have one thing in common, like say you're good at basketball. You may not all be friends. But for this to happen in a public light, in the face of, let's say, Kevin Durant's proven and noted sensitivities. He's going to get on a fake account and make fun of me for saying that, isn't he? Is this message from the Warriors ownership going to affect that locker room more than people were thinking?
No, I think you're right. I don't think you're overthinking this at all, and I don't think most people are. Because I look at the Warriors the same way I look at the Seahawks under Legion of Boom. They made a choice when they chose Russell Wilson over the rest of the league, over the Legion of Boom, and that was a choice that took years for them to finally come to grips with, because they didn't realize how many fault lines it laid across. I mean, it wasn't just a Marshawn versus Russell throwing at the 1 yard line in the Super Bowl. It's now you've alienated your defensive players, and you have one of your best players of a generation slipping you off as he's getting carted off the field. That thing ran deep. So I imagine with so many fewer players, Draymond, I would argue Draymond is akin to the Bulls having Rodman, and that he was, as much as Jordan was the face and the sassy and the sexy, figure, when they got Rodman, he was basically the spine, like the enforcer of the group,
right,
in a way that few people had the guts to be. And that's another thing. Draymond embraces the role he's in. I don't think Kevin Durant could embrace that role. So
you're 100% right, and there's two ways to look at it. Like, part of me is more pragmatic and saying, do you like everyone at work? No.
Yeah.
If you're listening and you work with me, I love you, but other people, there's just the sheer math of it all. You're not going to love everyone you work with. And I think that we as fans have this weird, like, oh, they're on the same team, so they must love each other. We don't recognize it as jobs. But at the same time, you can't call me a bitch at work.
Right.
You can't. Like, you cannot. You're a bitch. Everybody knows you're a bitch. Just leave. But that can't happen at work. And so while I don't think they need to be best friends, there's a level of respect that has been broached here. And apparently, so from a report from Chris Haynes of Yahoo, Green called Durant a bitch multiple times. The rhetoric sources said continued even when Kerr attempted to direct the team's attention to the whiteboard, which is a great visual image of like Kerr trying to break down plays while Draymond's calling someone a bitch, like, very loudly. We don't need you. We won without you. Leave. And that is the reason for the suspension. And the fact that they suspended him not for the bitch comments, but that for the comments of we don't want you, we don't need you, leave, feels like it's more of a punitive act from ownership and kind of like a kowtowing to the sensitivities of Kevin Durant, saying, we know this hurt your feelings, we're going to fix it everywhere we can. Meanwhile, Draymond's contract's coming up, Clay's contract's coming up, and you've now created a pecking order within that locker room, spoken or un, because before you could say, oh, it's always been there, but it wasn't acknowledged. Now ownership has taken a very public, very loud stance, because once the fight goes public, you can't say Draymond's going to sit out a game for general soreness. You have to suspend him. And once you suspend him, that's when the problems become, because now it's bigger than an in-house, we're working on what to do. Now it's a perceived perception of your own players.
Yeah, and as a coach, I don't know. I mean, Kerr is probably, he's up there to me as far as coaches with Spoelstra and with Lou, because not only has he dealt with it as a coach with that many personalities, and he's kind of kept things afloat, but he dealt with it, again, going back to as a player. Mm-hmm. Like, he wasn't in there just like sitting back and waiting for the day to end and being a participant on those teams. He was a guy who, if you go back and you look at some of the articles, you hear from some of the players, he had his issues, but he was smart enough to keep them under wraps. And I think I agree with you that it might have been an ownership thing, but I also think it might have been a little bit of him saying, hey, there's a way to do this where everybody can at least save some face, and you didn't give Kevin an opportunity to save face.
Well, I think that's the problem, is that ownership took it out of Steve Kerr's hands. You're right. They pay Steve Kerr to manage the situation, but with ownership coming out on ownership letterhead suspending Draymond, it becomes a bigger story. Like, I think it was just a lot of this was handled poorly, but a lot of it speaks to underlying tensions that have been there since Kevin kind of figured out that, oh, they don't love me like I wish they would. And that's why I think maybe your Knicks might actually be benefiting from this, my friend.
I would love that. I mean, the big thing for me is the if you go back and look at the parade and the way he was treated at the parade by some of even the execs were taking shots at him. He's basically, dealing with being what was the name of Mose? He's not even like Dwight Schrute. He's Mose.
And they've never let him not know that. And now when it comes down to, he might leave, it's turned into a very different approach to him. We're going to see how it works out for him because there's a lot of faith in doing so. Let's go to the sport you and I both love and both kind of get to wince at once in a while, which is football, particularly the NFL. Le'Veon Bell decided not to show up to report this year. He did not sign his franchise tender and will be not playing this year. This is broken sports media. You've got people like Michael DeCourcy, who still has his tweet up from the 14th. I saved it because I was like, I'm going to take it down. It's still up. There's an article in Sporting News titled Le'Veon Bell claimed to love the Steelers. We had a funny way of showing it. We'll get to the hypocrisy there in a second. Michael DeCourcy wrote, Le'Veon Bell said he wanted to be, quote, a Steeler for life. He walked away from $70 million, proving that this was never his plan. Then again, he never had a plan. Now, ignoring the fact that he did not walk away from $70 million. That's not what happened. We'll break down the numbers in a second. The temerity of sports media to act like there's some sort of intellectual arbiters over what another man should do about his money has really disgusted me this fall.
Oh, I'm with you. I mean, here in Pittsburgh, obviously, like I have to deal with my mother-in-law, who he's dead to her, and some family and friends, and then when I get to work, I have coworkers who are very cool about it, where they're just like, hey, I want to hear your opinion. I was like, to me, you have to realize, one, this isn't agent-driven. This is Le'Veon-driven, because when he did that, his agent realized he is exploiting a loophole that very few people in the NFL knew even existed, which will help all of his players, all of his fellow players, including the guys who cannibalized his locker like it was a Red Dead Revolver 2 side mission. And everyone eats. If the plate's full, everybody eats, but they're seeing it as this is a band of brothers. It's like, okay, you're on the same team that has a gentleman who's recovering from cancer, and he's being paid his full salary, which is a great move, both just in a day-to-day ethical standpoint and PR. But don't you think you would want to give him an opportunity to make more money in the future? And then by that, I mean, former Pitt running back John Connor. I mean, you look at Connor, and he's great, but he recovered from lymphoma, and time, you never know when that, we just see with Roman, you never know when that stuff comes back, if it comes back.
Right.
And so he's kind of reveling in this team mantra where, or even, as much as I love Tomlin, him saying we don't want hostages on this team. It's like, he's not a hostage, but you basically put a gun to his head when you said either you show up for us or show up for no one, and you in bad faith do not want to get him a deal commensurate to his contributions to the team. That was his own big argument, and I can't disagree with him.
And you really can't. It's so funny because you take a step back and say, well, let's look at all the parties involved. Le'Veon Bell's not going to show up. It means he's forfeited his entirety of $14.54 million that he was scheduled to make with the franchise tag within a reported $200,000 more in benefits. He'd already given up over $8.5 million in salary by not showing up the first 10 weeks. So really he lost out by not coming on Tuesday to approximately $5.5 million. So now what? What does this mean for the Steelers? This means that they get to continue abusing their found money in James Conner. What do I mean by found money? People are acting so surprised he's been this good. As I noted in an earlier podcast, James Conner was the offensive MVP of a Power 5 conference as a sophomore before his cancer diagnosis. So to say that we had no idea he had this in him, bit disingenuous. To say we didn't know he still had it may be fair. They're also getting the most touches, which is what he's received this year, of any running back in the NFL for a paltry $578 million. $578,000 this season. If you want an object lesson on why Le'Veon Bell demanded more money for the effort he's putting forth, this is it. They have a cheap commodity, and they're not saving him to pay him later. They're abusing it as much as possible right now. What does this mean for Le'Veon Bell? Well, glad you asked. Glad I asked. One of the only two backs in the NFL right now to be top 10 in rushing and be playing on a veteran contract, meaning not a first year or a transitional deal or a franchise deal, is Todd Gurley and Le'Veon Bell. Excuse me, and Adrian Peterson. He signed for the veteran minimum this year. People saying, oh, the Connors season, it destroys Bell's case. I disagree, because there was no way to get the Steelers to move anyway. Once the deadline came in mid-July for franchise tags, the only thing the Steelers could do from there is increase their offer. Spoilers, that was never going to happen. Could they franchise him again? They can. It's legally in the CBA. Well, the loophole you mentioned would force him to pay $25 million next year in guaranteed money. Not likely. They could transition tag him, which apparently is like what the Steelers are going to try to do. He'd be paid anywhere between $9.5 to $14.5 with an arbitrator determining the exact amount. The interesting part about the transition tag is that he's basically a restricted free agent. Any other team can offer him more money, but the Steelers would have the ability to trade him or to match that compensation. So what's kind of interesting about this is Bell, like you mentioned, isn't necessarily doing this for him. He's doing it to show players you have more power than you think. And what he's done is he's demonstrated that the franchise tag, which has long been a bugaboo for the Players Association, the Players Union. The union feels that the franchise tag is essentially robbing a player of a year that they could argue and bid for fair compensation for their work, which is true. What he's shown is that the franchise tag is you have a weapon against the franchise tag, just don't sign it. It's going to be very interesting when the collective bargaining opens back up and this is back on the table, because people are saying, oh, well, the Steelers won't offer him that much in the next year. You're probably right. And you can list the teams that won't. But the beauty of this entire plan is it all depends on one team that will. One team that will commit to him financially. I feel pretty good about those odds. What about you?
Oh, I think there's at least two teams, and I'm looking at all of as the red zone kicks on, all of these teams with rookie contracts for their quarterbacks, and they're doing what is now, again, similar to a running back, the du jour move, where you have this guy on a cheap deal, so we're going to spend everywhere else, and then when he's quote-unquote successful, we'll cut everywhere else and pay him. So, yeah, there will be a team in transition. I'm looking at, say, let's see, the Jaguars, looking at the Jets. The Bills may decide they want to spend some of their $100 or whatever $1 million in cap space.
Or if you're the Philadelphia Eagles and you're missing a running game.
If you're the Eagles, and that's the thing, and I see a lot of people saying the Packers, which would be a magnificent stroke by that new GM as well. I would say the Packers and the Eagles, because those are the places where you have chances for success. And the Eagles, because I'm a petty Hall of Famer, just to give a middle finger to the Steelers.
That would be delightful. And I've heard a lot of people saying that, he won't get as much as Gurley did. That people are decrying this, which is always so weird because everyone turns into anti-capitalists when it's not their money, when it's a player playing for their team. But no more than Mike Florio from PFT decided to point one thing out to everyone on the 13th. To everyone claiming Le'Veon Bell won't get more than Todd Gurley, Bell will be on the open market. Gurley got his contract with 2 years left in his rookie deal. That's a very major distinction. Guys,
yep.
Bell's going to get Bell did not lose here. It's fun because the article I'm reading had two case studies. 1997, Sean Gilbert, defensive tackle, skipped the 97 season when Washington franchised him. He eventually forced a trade to the Panthers and who gave him a long-term deal. Dan Williams did it the next year with the Chiefs, defensive end. That following February, he leveraged his holdout into a more lucrative deal with the same team. This has worked in the past. Both those players, when you look at the numbers, say, oh, it's not as much as Bell's going to get. The NFL money has exploded in the last 20 years, and the number Bell gets signed to probably going to shock a lot of these naysayers. And I'm all for it. I didn't think there was anyone in position to empower fellow players like this, but Le'Veon Bell proved me wrong. Someone who proved me right was Nathan Peterman. And you're a recovering Bills fan. We're not going to spend too much time here because Nathan Peterman was terrible. He's possibly the worst quarterback I've ever seen in my life. He'll probably be holding a clip over someone next year because God hates me and, just the universe is unfair. But I think his first stop should be in Colin Kaepernick's collusion lawsuit. In your time as a Bills fan, you saw a lot of bad football. Is Nathan Peterman the worst?
Oh, by far. I mean, historically, if he had played in the entirety of the Chargers game where he threw 5 interceptions, I wanted to see him get the record. I think it's like 8 or 9 picks in a game. He would have done it. And, that was kind of the start of me no longer being a fan because the arguments were, well, you take 2 of those picks out because guys should have caught them. And, the other 3, like, okay, now you're parsing through the eye of a needle here with some of this ridiculousness. Peterman not only was as bad as he was, but he also had a workout this week with the Lions. So not only should he be a witness, he should be the star witness in the Kaepernick collusion case.
Yeah, he is Exhibit A. We're going to talk now about college football, get that wrap up on because I just realized we've been talking for a while. But I do want to point out something, that a news story came out this week that a gay student athlete who was disowned by her parents and left with nothing, she was allowed by the NCAA this week to keep the donation money she'd been receiving and keep her eligibility. The reason this is a story because the NCAA had earlier rendered her ineligible. She had made her decide between the donations and her eligibility. Do not applaud the NCAA for doing the right thing. This shouldn't be a case. I'm going to link the article because I don't have time to get into it right now. I'm going to link the article in the show notes, but please take time to read this article, read about this story, and ask yourself one more time, what does the NCAA actually do? You have answers at DPalm66 on Twitter. We're going to talk about college football, do a quick roundup. Before we do it, I want to go to the roundup of petty. Because last week, Zach Smith, former Ohio State assistant coach and current piece of shit, decided to troll Tom Herman, the coach of the University of Texas Longhorns, by saying that he knew so many things about Tom Herman. He's a bad person and blah, 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 blah. He's going to spill all this tea. And Tom Herman texted him back, okay, cool, hook him. A very funny catchline that was floating around Twitter last Sunday. Well, Tom Herman's wife decided to wear an okay, cool, hook him to the game on Saturday. And as someone who also appreciates the petty, how do we rate this on a scale of 1 to 10?
Oh, I'm going to give that a strong 8. I thought she could have maybe did a little wink emoji tweet after it, but that's me. That's me going too much.
I'm going to give it a 9, if only because the portion of the proceeds for the sales of that shirt are donated to a woman called Moses. It is a women's outreach for battered women.
Oh, crap. Didn't know that. All right. I'm 9. That's
I'm rolling up a roundup on that one. Let's go now to college football, talk about some scores that matter and some scores that don't. But first, the score that matters the most, your Columbia Lions finished the season on a win, beating the Cornell Big Red. This is the first back-to-back winning season for the Columbia Lions since, I believe, the 60s. We're a Lion, man. It's a great day to be a Lion. Big ups to all those kids. Big ups to the coach. I just think that they wrapped up a very special season. They did something very impressive, and I'm very, very proud, very, very happy to be a Lion. And, I'm not going to ask for your opinion because no one else has opinions on Columbia football besides me, but I'll take the W. Let's move next over to the second most important game of the day. Georgia took on UMass. What are your feelings about these late season games where, like, oh, we're kind of in the heat of things, but, Georgia and Bama and about every team on the schedule is going to take the week off? Because I'll be honest, as someone who has a sports podcast, didn't love it.
Wow. I mean, well, Georgia is pretty good, but taking a week off, that's tough. That's stressful.
But do you bring in UMass? Like, I get it. UMass it's a team that it has football apparently at their school. But you watch what happened out there. I'm glad they were able to get Justin Fields on the field. I'm still one of those people who's terrified that he's going to leave if they don't play him more. He looked great running and throwing. They ended up scoring 66 points. And if you want to make the case for them to go ahead of Michigan, I'm not going to stop you.
Hey, I don't know about – well, I think Georgia, going ahead of Michigan, I can see that. Now, the one thing I want to see going into this next one is Ohio State getting jumped by UCF.
I refuse. UCF is a pipe dream and a dumb one.
Listen, the defending national champions need respect.
We're not on the show. They will receive none on the show. Let's go through the SEC scores. Alabama beat Citadel 50-17. They were tied at the half 10-all, and people got a little. The Bama faithful Twitter was actually pretty fun to read because they don't handle close games well. Partially because they're just not used to it. As a Georgia fan, I'm like, I'll call that Tuesday versus Mizzou. What are you talking about? But for Bama to be tied at Citadel at the half was a little nerve-wracking for them. They opened it up at the end. Like I said, a lot of teams took this week off. Florida beat Idaho 63-10. Kentucky beat Middle Tennessee 34-23. Kentucky, look, I was very proud of you going into the Georgia game, and then you lost last week, and then this thing where you only beat Middle Tennessee by 11. I need you to be decent because otherwise I have no claims in the East that the East is any good. I need Kentucky. Hold it together for me for a few more weeks here. Mississippi State beat Arkansas 52-6. Mizzou beat Tennessee 50-17. Again, Kentucky. What? Auburn beat Liberty 53-0. A&M beat UAB 41-20. Rice lost to LSU 42-10. South Carolina beat Chattanooga 49-9. And Ole Miss fell to Vanderbilt 29-36. The SEC, look, we know what's going to happen. We know how it's going to end. Georgia, Bama in the Dome in about 2 weeks. I'm not going. For those who want to ask, if you want to send me tickets, I'll sell them because the last time I went to a Georgia-Bama game, it was a national title game, and we just don't talk about it. Top 25. Boise State beat New Mexico 45-14. Penn State beat Rutgers 20-7. Ohio State squeaked by Maryland 52-51. Look, I'm not saying Maryland's a good football team. I am saying I think Urban's about to take another sabbatical. And it's his own fault because none of us made him hire Greg Schiano.
Well, he went full Sanford and Son throughout that final 3 minutes of the game.
He was very animated. It was almost awkward. It was like, hey, man, reel it in some.
And I will always stand for Maryland as long as they have gotten rid of a murderer as head coach. Sure. And their offensive coordinator / interim head coach is the man who got Nathan Peterman drafted. Matt Canada is a miracle worker, and he almost worked a miracle against Ohio State. So much love to Matt Canada.
That's how I feel about Jimbo. And who was somebody from Florida State who got E.J. Manuel? I was like, wow, E.J. Manuel got the first day. Man, that's amazing. He's a magician. Speaking of murderers, Notre Dame beat Syracuse 36-3.
I mean, shoot, you look at EJ put up on the Instagram post that was fire because he was like, listen, I never had a game like Peterman, and y'all got me out this league.
Well, you and I have a much longer conversation about what being a black backup means in this league and what being a white backup means. But I digress. Northwestern beat Minnesota 24-14. Utah beat Colorado 30-7. Utah State beat Colorado State 29-24 after a very sad end of the game. If you haven't seen it, Colorado State wins the game on a walk-off touchdown, except the player who caught it stepped out of bounds and was the first player to touch it. It's illegal, so Colorado State ends up losing to Utah State. I already mentioned Notre Dame's murdering score. FSU knocked off Boston College. And a lot of people want to fire that coach in Tallahassee, and I'm not going to slow you down. But I will say that that's a good win. For Boston College is a good football team. That's a good win. And this should make everyone reconsider. No, I'm going to save it because Notre Dame's going to get in. I'm going to save it for that podcast. When Notre Dame gets in, y'all hear my thoughts. Oklahoma State beat West Virginia. Will Grier survives, though, 45-41. Michigan beat Indiana 31-20. Washington beat Oregon State 42-23. Clemson beat Duke 35-6. Oklahoma beat Kansas 55-40. Let's talk about them for a second because Kansas, as of recording, I don't know if it's actually happened because I've been talking to you. The rumor was they were going to announce Les Miles as their new head coach. What's your feeling about the Mad Hatter going to the Big 12?
I think that'll be fun. I think much like watching Lamar Jackson just score a touchdown drive without throwing the ball once against these Cincinnati Bengals, there needs to be a little different in college football. Without the Mad Hatter, you're missing that. And I'm looking forward to what he brings, how he convinces all these athletes to come to Kansas.
So that's my next question: is that Les Miles has never recruited a quarterback ever in the history of the world, and he's going to a league that's predicated on spread offenses that doesn't exactly do the defensive thing. He's either going to be a huge disruptor or it's going to fail miserably. All I know is I'm here for it. And let's hope Kansas has real field and not turf so he has something to eat before the game. Texas beat Iowa State 24-10. Okay, cool, hook 'em. UCF beat Cincinnati 38-13. I'm doing this once. Well, UCF has no place at any tables. None. The strength of schedules alone won't allow me to lie to you and say that, oh, we just have the conversation. No, I don't want to waste my time. I don't want to waste yours. Wazoo beat Arizona 69-28. Someone sent me a link where like, hey, remember when Mike Leach did this? Yes, I remember Mike Leach is a crazy Trumper and was trying to prove that doctored videos of Barack Obama were real in the offseason. And for everyone who wants to say, oh, we should hire Mike Leach, this is why he's in Wazoo. Washington State is populated by 88% hiding serial killers. I don't have a source for that number, but I feel good about it. And you can be a crazy Trump guy and recruit there. You can't do that anywhere else. I'm sorry. You're not going to – Auburn fans who are trying to go to Gus, Mike Leach is not the answer. You're not going to bring that guy into Atlanta families and say, oh, send your kid here. That's not going to work. Rich, you have anything to say about the state of your Pitt football team?
You mean the ACC Coastal Champion Pitt football team?
That's why I gave you the form, my friend.
See, this is a dream that I did not want because I was just happy with a bowl game. When they were 2-3, I was just hoping to get 6 wins and get the Idaho Heart of Atlanta Bowl or something silly. Instead, they are now going to go against the team who pats a racist rock every time they get on the darn hill, and I hope they knock their block off. Up until that game ended, I was saying I really don't want them to win the ACC Coastal because I don't want to see them go up against Clemson. But now Dabo and his Trump-loving, this is a sin problem, not a race problem, Sells needs to get smoked, needs to get got again by Pitt. And by God, if that gets them in the playoff or at least create some chaos in the playoff, so be it.
I'm always cheering for someone to knock off Clemson. I don't believe in them, and they make me very upset that a man named Dabo is now largely respected in any field. Rich, tell everyone where they can find you, my friend.
Yeah, if you're looking to find me on the Twitter, it is Rich_Fann, F-A-N-N. If you're looking to find my shows, you can search PWTorch Livecast on any of your podcast products or East Coast Cast on any of those aforementioned products.
That's awesome, man. Deep dive. I know you and I kind of talked about it. Am I coming on for the year-end wrap-up?
Yes. I'm trying to do a year-end. I know you're definitely in. I think Cam's also in. I want to do a year-end roundtable with some of my favorite wrestling fans of color and talking about what they enjoyed. 2 men, 2 women. So you, Cam, C.R. Reed, hopefully, and my girl Bree. If not, I'll try to find one of my other fans of color, just so people don't hear the same voices as they always do. I know my buddy Shahid always argues, can I find a black basketball fan that's covering, basketball outside of the local guys, because it gets kind of old.
Right, no. And I want to say, I really appreciate that you make sure those lenses are focused on in your podcast, because you're right. It feels like a lot of times, particularly in pro wrestling, there's a certain view that we all kind of, quote unquote, have to take, and you challenge it from the jump with the deep dive, and I appreciate it.
I appreciate you keeping track of stuff like that, because I think the only thing we can do is help the circles we're in. And I learned that watching you guys, you and Chris and everyone in the whole MTR network, because that was very enlightening to me that, there was this group of folks out here that had a different voice and got it out there without needing someone to give them some random white dude giving them hey, here's the colored folks' thoughts. And that's why I appreciate Wade, because never have I ever been given a subject. Never has he called me and pulled a episode for quantity. The quality, like I've had some episodes where the sound kind of was crap and he had to pull them. Hey, man's got to keep his house paid. But he's never presented it as, hey, here is how we reach the blacks. It's, hey, these people came to me and were very proud of what they were going to do and an idea and a plan, and let's see what happens. And, nothing I can ask better than that.
And it's one of the oldest platforms for pro wrestling on the internet, PWTorch. I don't always agree with the takes he has, and I think he and I butted heads more than once on Twitter, but shout out to Taylor for doing what he does and providing the platform for my friends to keep getting on and eventually invite me to one of these wrestling shows. Wink, wink, nudge, fucking nudge. This has been the show. I am DPalm. Follow me on Twitter at DPalm66. Follow the show on Twitter at UDPod. Follow the entire MTR Network at the MTR Network. That was your show. This is your outro. See you guys next week.